Hello and welcome back to the Business That Matters Spotlight. My name is Warren Coughlin, your host. I've been really looking forward to today's conversation. Our guest is an entrepreneur, a foodie, a mentor, supporter of good health, good causes, the runner of a certified B Corp. So we got a lot of things to cover. Richa Gupta is the founder of Good Food for Good. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm really honored.
Oh, it's so great. You've done some really interesting things, and I want to dive into them. But first, just as we always do on the Spotlight, we always like to give a tip right off the top, just in case people can't stick around for the whole podcast. So, as somebody who has done a lot of things entrepreneurially, for a business owner who wants to integrate their values into their business or do some good with their business, but also have a successful business starting out, what tip would you give somebody?
That's a very, very good question. And I get asked that a lot. And I would highly recommend for them to weave in whatever good they want to do or whatever problem they want to solve or whatever impact they want to have. It's all, end of the day, is one thing into the business. Because let's say if diversity matters to you, or if you really believe that diverse voices add value to the business, then that should become part of your policy. That's how your hiring needs to be done. That's how you support with your wallet. So anywhere you spend your money, whether it's a marketing agency, whether it's transportation, you look for diverse suppliers to support that. That's how we have impact every day versus waiting for X to happen and then you do Y.
Right. So yeah, some people do the once this happens, then I will. As opposed to just saying there is no once. We do that from the get-go.
Yeah. Like today is all we got, right?
That's true. So tell us a little bit about I love the brand. I'm going to ask you something about the branding name and its impact in a minute, but just tell us a little bit about what Good Food for Good actually does. Like what are the products you produce? Who do you produce them for? Where do you sell them?
Yes, for sure. So Good Food for Good, how we like to call it, it's a better for all brand. The idea was to create something that's beyond better for you. So better for you tends to be just you as a person. Here for better for all, we mean better for you for sure. That comes first. Then it's better for the planet and better for the community. So we make a line of organic pantry staples, things like ketchups, barbecue sauces. We have Indian sauces, pasta sauces, Mexican sauces, like the world flavors of sauces that are made with, of course, all organic ingredients. They're all dairy-free. They're all plant-based. They're all sugar-free. So really good for your health. Plus, they're good for climate because, one, we use glass packaging. We try and avoid plastic wherever possible. We use only organic ingredients that are known to be good for soil. And third, we have a buy one, feed one motto. So every time you buy our products, we feed a person in need. We've donated over 2 million meals to people in need across Canada, US, and India. Wow. Plus, we are a certified B Corp. So all our values are woven into the business, whether it's hiring practices or policy. So it's like truly the idea was it's not just better for me, but it's better for you. It's better for everyone involved, all stakeholders.
Right on.
That's what we do.
So, and how long has the business been running?
So the initial idea was 2014, but I started scaling in 2017.
Nice. Now, one of the things I mentioned the brand, so I love that you actually put it right on the label, Good Food for Good. And one of the reasons I liked it is because, people have some of the most meaningful conversations in their lives around the dinner table. And maybe you don't have anecdotes about this, but I just wonder if a family's sitting around with their kids and there's this sauce bottle on the table that says Good Food for Good, whether that somewhere stimulates conversations among family members about how are we doing good and how can we do good and what does it mean for a company to do good? Do you have any stories like that?
I wish I had stories like that. Now I'm going to email my customer chain and ask them, did that ever happen? But that's a very interesting point. The only anecdotals I've heard is when I meet people at a trade show, or especially entrepreneurs or other people in the industry, and I shake my hand. I say, "Hi, I'm Richa from Good Food for Good." they go like, "You are in my fridge." But other than that, I wished, seriously, when I started the company, that was one of the goals, that how can we become an example, for people to see how you can do good while doing good, right? Like, you don't have to pick one thing. And that's what the name was all about too. Like, it's good food and it's for a good reason. Um, and I hope it has done that. But I wish I had those stories. Now I have to do something to stimulate those stories.
It might be something to actually collect, or, collect it through your social media, like get stories about the conversations it stimulated.
Exactly.
Those are just important and food is such an integral part of value chains everywhere. Like, food production impacts communities and families and health, and so much of what we do, and climate change and waste, and so much of that to make that a central piece right on your dinner table is an important thing. But let's talk a little bit about the product itself, because
Sure.
I want to get into the impacts and stuff, but for people to understand, like, yes, it's a nice brand and it's a nice idea, but you've done some really interesting things. Like, you've talked about, just to take, well, I want to say two things about your products as I understand them. When we hear sauces like ketchup and barbecue sauce, that's like a sauce in a traditional sense, but you've got things that are actually very substantial too, like bolognese and things like that are meals, or major contributors to the meal, right? It's not just taste enhancement, it's actually part of the substantive meal, right?
Totally. Sorry, go ahead. I don't think
No,
the
go ahead.
question was more.
So part of it, yeah. So when you looked at ketchup, for instance, I saw on your site you give a really great education on just like the sugar content that's there in ketchups and barbecue sauces, and you did a lot of research to figure out how to provide a good quality product that doesn't label or fill us with that kind of crap. And so, like, tell us a little bit about the product, about people's response to it. Like, how does it actually taste? Like, at the end of the day, people go, I want to do good, but if my kid isn't going to like it, I'm not going to buy it. So what's been the response to the actual quality of the product?
Sure. Okay, so we can start with ketchup first. So ketchup was actually not our first product, but it is now our most popular product. Our first products was line of world flavored sauces. So our Indian Mexican sauces were the first products that we launched. But it was consumers coming and asking me, because I was sweetening the sauces with dates, that could you make ketchup? Because ketchup is sweetened. It has so much sugar. So they actually brought it to my knowledge about the sugar in ketchup. And that's when I started working on it. The reason I chose to use dates is because dates have existed for millennia without giving any side effects. There's so many new to the world, 0-calorie sweeteners that people can use to have a lower sugar impact. But if you look at the research, you'll find almost all of them have long-term side effects. And if a product is meant for families, I didn't want to create something that kids growing up are eating food that's destroying their either gut microbe, hormonal health. Like, I made this for my children. I made this food for my family. I would never put anything in it that, even if I read one article or one research paper that talks about there's a slight chance that it might cause you any harm in my food. That's the person I am. So the response has been pretty good. Again, taste is very, very subjective. There are people who love it. We have feedback from consumers. They said their kid only eats our ketchup. And then we have consumers who say their kid would not touch it. So, it all depends on, again, how the kid's taste palette has been developed.
Mm-hmm.
If all the child has ever had is sugar-loaded candy, everything with sugar, and I see a lot of kids just consume sugar morning till the end of the day, all of a sudden you give them something that one has 75% less sugar, sweetener source is different, it has apple cider vinegar instead of a normal vinegar, it could be a shock. Versus a child who normally parents just eat healthier, kid is used to variety of flavors and it already has a more refined taste palette. you would have a different adoption then. So again, taste is subjective, I
Right.
would say.
But are regular customers, what kind of feedback do you get on the quality from them?
Again, there are many who love it, and there are many, even my close family friends, who don't like it. Again, it's your palate. So if
Yeah.
you are used to, and if you know how bad sugar is for you take those steps. But if you don't believe in that, and if your palate is not like that, then you won't do it.
Right.
I think, nothing is made for everybody. There is no item that you can say that 100% of the population is
Oh, for
going
sure.
to consume it and say this is the best tasting thing on planet.
So how did you get started? Like where did the even idea of this come from? Like, are you a food chemist, or was it just, I want to figure out way to do this better for my kids?
Not at all. Not a food chemist at all. My education is in marketing. I worked in fashion. Then I joined General Mills in marketing. So General Mills, I would say, was my groundwork for launching this company. As you might already know, CPG trains you really well. The whole idea is, as a marketer, you are
CPG.
responsible for, yeah, CPG, exactly. You are responsible for a P&L, so you understand all aspects of the business. Um, and the idea sparked from my personal need. Like, I was trying to eat healthy, live a restrictive diet. So I cut down dairy. I was removing sugar from my diet. I didn't want to add preservatives and additives to my diet. Also, I grew up in India, right? Like I moved to North America only when I was 25. I grew up in India where I had never seen canned food in my life. So everything you ate is fresh. Like your parent makes food 3 times a day for you from fresh ingredients. And here I was, working 12-hour days, struggling to make food for my child, or really feeling guilty every time I ordered a pizza for my daughter. So as all parents want to do, you want to do better for your child than what your parents were able to do. And here I was just struggling every day to bring food that I call real and wholesome and that I could personally feel good about consuming to the table in short amount of time. And that's how the idea came to be. Then I researched, like I did farmers markets for multiple years, and that became like my lemonade stand. It's understanding, are there more people like me, right? Like, and what are the things they face if they are living with a restrictive diet? And I learned, like most people who live with a restrictive diet, they have a very boring, unless they know how to cook and unless they really invest time in cooking everything from scratch, your diet becomes really boring because you can't eat most of the things that you see on the store shelves. You don't want to put it on your plate, or you can't put it on your plate for health reasons. And that's the reason the company was started. The purpose was to make it interesting for people to eat healthy. Eating healthy shouldn't be boring. It's end of the day, food brings so much joy. Flavor brings so much joy. It's not just about nutrition. Nutrition is important, but it's not just about it, right? Like, to sustain anything, it needs to taste good.
Right.
And that's how Good Food for Good was born.
Nice. Now, there's two theories on starting a business, and I like your story, but I just want to tee it up this way. There's the one theory is there's a great book called The Chicken Entrepreneur, I think it's called. And his theory is, stay in your job, build your income, test your business first, then make the move once you're sort of generating sufficient income or knowledge to make it happen. The other is leap into the void, follow your passions, and see what happens, and hopefully you're sort of building the plane in the air. Which of those did you follow?
I jumped with both feet. And also because the kind of job that I was doing, there is no way. And being a new parent, there was no way at that time I would have physically survived launching a company, a brand, while doing all of that and understanding, like the learning curve is so steep. Even though, like, I in last question I answered that how CPG prepares you. Yes, it does prepare you, but it prepares you in a way that you know who to go to, who will answer that question when you have a question. When
Right.
you start a business on your own, a small startup, that all that questions come back to you. You need to find an answer yourself. So there was absolutely no way. But if I have to recommend to someone, I would definitely recommend the chicken method, to be honest.
A little more secure, I guess, eh?
Yes.
Now, but having done it the other way, like what did you learn that was really important? Like one of the things I love about your story is you were really open to market feedback. Like I think the some of the business lessons in this were how agile you were in response to market feedback. So maybe you can just talk a little bit about that, about testing and how you took that information and how it modified your business.
Totally. Test and learn. That's the model I applied, and I highly recommend that to do that model when you don't have money, as well, because it saves a lot of dollars that you would have wasted if you just launch a product without knowing enough about how market is going to react. So as I told you guys before, I did farmers markets for multiple years. And every time, I started doing it even when my product had a shelf life of 1 week. Like I wanted to create something with fresh ingredients, no sugar, no preservatives, and I couldn't find an R&D person who can tell me that okay, if this is the recipe and these are the basic pH and basic formulation, water activity, how long the product would last. So I had to actually test the product week after week after week to know how long it will be fine in the fridge. At that time, it was just in the fridge. So when I would sell it to somebody else and then finish it within a week, it's fresh sauce. And then next week it was like, okay, it's good for 2 weeks. And it was it's just testing on a daily basis. I learned about flavor aspect. What are the things that people were liking and what are they not liking? So the spice levels in different things, how people are using the sauces. I would have always used them for cooking, but I met so many people who were using them as dips. They would, just have their cracker and they would use our sauces as dips, or they would use them as marinades. Initially, we had a line of world, and actually, that's a great lesson that I learned during farmers markets. We launched new to the world dips as well. We had bean dips, but they were like one was called Bunio Losada, Spanish inspired. One was Oaxaca Arbol, a Mexican inspired dip, and then one was Mumbai Mint, with an Indian inspired dip. All high protein, lots of vegetables, and they did so well in farmers market. The minute we launched in retail, they just flopped like anything because people didn't know what they were.
Right.
They were type of hummuses, but nobody knew what to expect. And they had a really short shelf life. They were like 6 weeks in fridge. And 2 months after I launched them in retail, I had to call it off because it does not, that model didn't work in retail. It was great as a farmer's market product. I sold that a lot more than my sauces. But without adding preservatives to it or changing the name, like calling it some hummus, it wouldn't have done anything. So that was one big learning early on, that you need to make the product as close as possible to what consumers understand today, especially when you don't have money
That's
to
a great
for marketing.
lesson. That's a great lesson about types of testing too, because in traditional, folks like me come in and say test in a small way and then expand. But context matters too. The buyer at a farmer's market who can sit there and ask you questions is a completely different buying experience and probably target than the person who goes into Loblaws to buy.
Yeah,
And to
exactly.
understand the fact that you get good lift in one environment doesn't mean you're going to get lift in another. Like you got to really look at the criteria, the context, and the buyer before you make. Because I could see someone doing, hey, 10 farmers markets, things worked really well. We're going to now invest in a factory and hurt themselves. So that's a
Exactly.
lesson.
Yeah, no, totally. And, I didn't expect that would happen, and it did. So, a lesson
Mm.
that I tell everyone, like if anybody comes to me and is ready to ask that question, I tell them, one, don't go too far beyond what, if your goal is to get into grocery, mass grocery. If that's not the goal, there's so many things you can do. But if mass grocery is where you're trying to go, the further it is from what consumers are used to, the harder it is to sell.
Now, you mentioned shelf life, just for people who aren't familiar with the industry. I just think that's a really interesting thing, that how do you create shelf stable products while remaining organic and natural? Like,
Yeah.
was that a real difficult nut to crack? And did you have to make any compromises on your vision or mission in order to achieve that?
So organic is not a problem. There are many organic products that have preservatives too. So organic does not mean no preservative. I just didn't want to add any preservatives to the product um, to make it shelf stable. So
Mm-hmm.
for me, the challenge was I was trying to do it with natural sources. So shelf stability, now I understand a lot more of it than what I understood when I started the company. It's a balance between the pH, which is the acidity of the product. So if a product is inherently more acidic, like lemon juice or lime juice, it's very easy to preserve them because it is acidic, and bacteria does not grow in acidic environment. Microbes don't grow in a certain amount, like a acidic environment that's lower than a certain pH. I think I'm going too complicated right now. Then the second thing is water activity, which is how much water is in the product. So things that don't have much water have a longer shelf life naturally, right? Like your spice blend, right? They
Right.
can, or your tea, they can last on shelf forever. But the minute you put water, you're bringing the challenge. And the third is packaging, right? Like if there is any oxygen that's going in the product while it's sitting on the shelf, it will, because you need oxygen for,
Mm-hmm.
again, microbes or any life to survive. So those are the three main things that are required. And water activity is controlled through sugar and salt, the level of amount of sugar and salt. That's why packaged sauces tend to have a lot of sugar and salt, because they are controlling the environment through that. Acidity is controlled through acids. So normally citric acids, lactic acid, not lactic acid, wrong term, citric acid and ascorbic acid are normally used
Right.
to create that acidity without a lot of tangy flavor. Challenge is citric acid is a corn byproduct. It is not a lemon juice and lime juice. The stuff that you find in store bought products. And I didn't want to use that. So I was trying to balance the lime juice, but still not make it so acidic that people can't eat it or
Right.
add too much sugar, or you add a lot of lime juice and then you add a lot of sugar to balance it out. And then you add a lot of spices to balance that out. And that's how most products are made. And the goal is to get to that NPH and water activity that would make the product shelf stable. Here I was trying to create it as close as possible to what I make at home. So I was not doing backward math. I was doing, this is how it should taste.
Mm-hmm.
How can we make it last longer? Versus that's what I need to. So let's just load in things to get to that.
And so, how did you stick true to that, or do you use preservatives, or is it all just
No,
that
we didn't
balance?
use preservatives. We do use lime juice or lemon juice where needed. It's still all natural. It was
Nice.
a lot of trial and error. And we don't, so if you taste our sauces, they're not overly spiced up, because again, is used to mask the sugar and the tanginess and the salt that comes. Like I'm talking about, let's say right now, Indian sauces, right? Like tend to be. So we don't mask with that. We use no seed oils. All the oils that we use are either coconut oil or olive oil. That's the only oils that we use in our product. Again, trying to make something that not just myself, but anybody looks at it and says it's good, right? Like the ingredients are good. I can't control everybody's taste palette. It's good for my taste palette and many other people, but it might not be good for 100% of the population's taste palette. And I think any and every entrepreneur should, be okay with that because
Absolutely.
you
Yeah.
cannot.
Well, you stayed true to your purpose and mission, which is one of the interesting things. Like keep testing and measuring, but finding the way that will actually work. And I actually think it's the fact you're not masking things makes it a more pure product. So people are actually getting the real flavor, which is
Totally. And people who are consumers who are on the same wavelength where I was, like who really care about what goes in their body, and their body is their temple. They swear by our products. The recent review that I received, just this is makes my heart warm when you hear from people what the reason why you started the company. They're like, I left all the sauces, I had lost hope till I found your product. Right.
wow.
So it makes you feel like, okay, at least I'm making a difference in somebody's life with what I'm doing in my life, or with my life, right? And that makes your day. I mean, if that doesn't make your day, I don't know what would.
Yeah, no kidding. That's awesome. So how did you, what then happened? Like, how did you get from, farmers markets into Whole Foods? Like that's a big jump, or into, any of the other retail chains. Like retail shelf space is a
Yeah.
difficult thing to crack. I've worked with a number of different clients who've had to manage like the procurement officer and the buyer at different retail chains, and the negotiations to get you in shelf space, and how they test it, and where in the shelf you get, and all of that. How did you make that transition?
Yeah, it's, starting out is easy, I would say. So getting your first 10, 20, 30, 50 stores, independent stores, fairly easy. For us, what happened was, I think it was in the second or third farmers market that I was in, right here in Toronto. Whole Foods, Yorkville, the person in charge for buying the products happened to be in the market. He looked at our products and he's like, oh, this should be at Whole Foods. I'm like, yeah, I mean, I've made for that consumer. I'm that consumer, but I don't know if I'm ready yet. It's, still has a very short shelf life. I'm still experimenting. He's like, no, I am the buyer. Let's work and make it happen. Like, you would need new labels at that time. I had craft labels and stuff. So till then, to be honest, I wasn't even thinking. I was still in the testing stage. Was not thinking of scaling it. It was, let me figure things out. Let me see if there are people interested in what I have to make. It was like our second or third farmers market. So very, early on, I knew worst case scenario, if it doesn't work, I can go back to CPG, or I can go back to a job. I had enough education and work experience to land me a job after that. So that was my testing stage. And, and then we started working with him. It took us 6 to 8 months. We hired a branding agency. We worked with brand. We got new labels, UPCs. Like, that's a whole new process to understand. When somebody starts a business, they didn't realize how complicated even that part can get. And then we hit Whole Foods market. We were, at that time, I was also, a very ambitious entrepreneur. I didn't want to change one thing. I wanted to change everything. So when I learned about the broker and the distributor model, I'm like, this is ridiculous. Consumers should get the, product, the price at the product that it's more affordable, right? And if I remove all these different layers,
Right.
I would be able to get it at a better price to consumer. Not realizing systems there's a reason why a system works the way it works. And I did that for multiple years, and I had only, a handful of stores at that time, and we were producing ourselves, and I was only using fresh tomatoes, organic tomatoes, which are very limited in Toronto in winter for anybody who wants to start anything with fresh organic tomatoes in Canada. And I learned that was just not a model I could not sustain or grow working like that. So that's why I said I started scaling in 2017. And 2017 is when I was like, okay, I give in.
Again, that's a really important lesson, I think. Like, for people, it's been a theme actually on this podcast to a degree, of people who are really wanting to do good, that sometimes there are choices that have to be made. right? That the purity of your desire to do good is sometimes constrained by just a supply chain system, a financing model, an availability of materials, and that kind of thing. And it's important, I think, to sort of distinguish between the essentials and the non-essentials. And
Yes.
how you sit down with, like, to change an entire food distribution system is probably a big ask for a startup entrepreneur.
Yes. That
So,
alone should be a business.
yeah, exactly. And so then you have to make those choices. So, like, one of the things I just think is so great about your story is those two things. Like, you stayed absolutely committed to your vision for the product and its purity, and experimented and tested and wouldn't compromise on what you're putting in the food to make sure it was healthy. But then on something over which you couldn't have control and was, not an essential to your business, but was an essential to you at succeeding in your business, you had to yield. And having the wisdom to sort of accept those things that are outside your control while remaining committed to the things that are inside your control, even though difficult, requires, I think, a certain degree of maturity and humility. Like, would you say that's a fair assessment of yourself in a non in a humble way?
uh, I, I, I would say to some extent, but I wish seriously I wish someone knocked that knowledge in me early on, right? Like literally not letting me think that I'm mature and let me make decisions. Like, I think these are
Don't let her out with the car keys.
exactly. Sometimes you need that. Sometimes we entrepreneurs, we are so passionate about the vision or what we want to do, that we don't see the reality. We only see the dream,
Mm-hmm.
and we are in that dream world. So a dreamer needs a realist to work alongside.
Well, let's talk about that, because you actually made a shift there. So you're not just an entrepreneur, but you've done some mentorship as well. So that desire that you just talked about, you've actually put into action. So tell me a little bit about that transition, or that addition. It's not a transition; it was an addition.
Yeah, no, totally. And I absolutely love doing that. That's the favorite part of my job right now, is is mentoring young entrepreneurs who are at the stage where I wish I had a realist show me the mirror, because I think after a few years, you anyways, reality kicks in at some point. But when you're just starting out, you're in love. And that's how I used to describe my business. It was like falling in love. I had no fear.
Right.
I was in love, and when you fall in love, you don't see red flags. You don't even see the person. You just see the life that you are imagining in your head. And that's exactly how I was as an entrepreneur. I was living in this my own life in my head. And reality is perception, right? That was my perception of where I'm heading. And that's how most entrepreneurs, when they start, is you're just so hyped up, and it's needed. Some of it is needed, otherwise you would never take a step. You need that naivety, you need that excitement, you need that passion to take the next step. But it also needs that reality. I've been there. That's why I'm guiding you. Rest is up to you. As
And so
can
what's the
happen.
vehicle through which you provide that mentorship?
I do through Whitespace. That's what you asked, right? Maybe yeah. I do it through Whitespace and through Tree Frog Accelerator. They're two in the city in Toronto. Also through Included, which is a US-based nonprofit organization. Now it is a nonprofit organization. We started it in 2020. So I'm one of the founding members of that organization. And our goal is to provide means to entrepreneurs of color when they're starting out. So we've partnered with organizations like New Hope, and New Hope is the organization that does Expo West and also Fancy Food Show, to provide access to booths for monetary rewards to people starting out. So that gives them some relief and mentorship. Like our doors are always open for them to come and ask questions and guide them in this process. It's a complicated journey.
And is it focused on the food services? Or
so
is it
included is food, completely food. And even the Y space, when I mentor, it's usually food.
and the one you participate in the States, that's primarily focused on BIPOC,
Yes,
like Black, Indigenous, people of color, for those who don't know what that means. And you've articulated the reason that's important. Like, for people who don't understand it, you've articulated that a lot of BIPOC entrepreneurs in the space kind of get short shrift in investment and opportunities. Can you talk a little bit about what that actually looks like so people can understand why it's so important?
Yeah, I can talk about the root cause why that exists, right? Like if
Or how it shows up. Like, what does that even mean, getting short shrift?
um when people who are at a decision making stage. So let's first talk about like the BIPOC situation. When you're a BIPOC or an immigrant, you live in certain communities, you have the certain circle that you hang out with, right? So like that's your circle. Like we all have our circles, right? We don't have people with power or people who had the opportunity, most of them, to become powerful in our circle. That's the reality of things, right? Like you end up staying, most of us end up staying in that circle. Most of the funding is controlled by, businessmen who've been around for a long period of time, like money has been passed on. They tend to be, or I should say, BIPOC representation in those circles is very limited.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why, whether it's industry or whether it's even decision makers in all industries, tend to be, people who have existed, done that for a long period of time, and then it just carries on. And we all tend to relate a lot more with people who are like us, whether it's likeness in how we look, whether it's likeness in how we grew up, whether it's likeness in our socioeconomic conditions, everything, right? Like people hang out together, like even friends in high school. You make friends with people who are like you. That has always been the thing. So with BIPOC being a group that hasn't had in the past that privilege of neither having those contacts or the lifestyle being very different, that connection does not happen as easily as it would happen with people who look or live like you. So that makes it just a little bit harder for BIPOC to access all those resources or the funding needed for them to scale. Like a lot of people get funding pre-seed or pre-seed, which is like even before you launch a product. But if you look at the research on most people who get that funding are not in BIPOC group.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have friends who have money, or someone or then someone who's like you, trusts you. But when you are none of that, it's just harder. And I think it's a part with BIPOC population too. Maybe we don't have the confidence to even go and keep knocking at that many doors, because just when you don't know what you're missing.
Right. And so the organization, what's it called again? The US one that does this?
It's called Included.
So how does Included, like, do you provide investment, or do you provide relationships or introductions?
Mostly introductions, and just, I think, even giving them an opportunity to exhibit at places like Expo West and Fancy Food Show for free. It usually costs anywhere between $10,000 to $20,000. Is partly an investment and trust in the brand, and people actually have to apply. So not everybody gets through, like, for those slots. Everybody can ask questions, and mentorship is provided to everyone. However, for those, they apply, and people who make it through, who have an idea that's scalable, goes to the next level, or is at a stage where they can actually show the product to retailers, right? Because some people are very early on, right? If you're making cookie in your kitchen, and other than that, you have no idea what it's going to be, then going to Expo West is not going to get you anything.
Right.
And when you open that door, then several other doors open after that. So it's just we provide them that stepping stone.
Do you have any success stories of just anyone who's gone through the program and has actually achieved some scaling?
There are plenty, actually. So the program was started in 2020. I know Maza is a uh, um, I'm forgetting. It's a Middle Eastern sauce brand. They've done really good. There's something called Sea Snacks. I think they've done really good. So there are quite a few that
Nice.
yeah,
That
that
must
have
feel good
been,
that you're having that kind of impact. Like,
yeah, that have been able to scale with that little help. I mean, it's very little help, to be honest. It is very little bit of our time and a little bit of funds and help from New Hope and um, Fancy Food Show as organizations too. Like they committed to it. They committed to their dollars to help out to bring balance in this, diverse world.
yeah. But sometimes it's just a vote of confidence from somebody who's been there ahead of you and one little
Yeah,
tip, and that's all it takes to get someone through that door. So that's a
absolutely.
wonderful initiative. Now, for yourself, what's interesting? So I've been coaching entrepreneurs for, I'm aging myself, but 22 years, 23
Wow.
years. And I'm still studying. I'm still, looking and learning and getting coached and all that kind of stuff from other people as well, because there's always more to learn. So what do you do to keep sharpening the saw, so to speak? Like how do you continue getting mentorship yourself, or is it just learning through experience?
It's become, yeah, mentorship for sure. But most of my mentors are more casual mentors. It's when I am in trouble, I call, holler. I wish I could make them more regular and, just meet quarterly and, give it a system, but I haven't been able to figure that out. But peer to peer a lot, like a lot of my peers. Um, we tend to meet more often and share what we are going through and help each other out wherever we can. Um, Also, I feel I try and meditate. Um, that really helps me center and not get carried away. I felt it has really helped reduce the reaction, or instead of reacting, responding. I should not say reduce the reaction time. It would be in corporate world taking very differently.
Right.
But you know what I mean. So
Oh
instead of
yeah.
react, I respond. Try to
Yeah.
respond. Yeah.
Viktor Frankl has in his book, Man's Search for Meaning. He was written a long time ago, so it's a gendered title, but he was a Holocaust survivor, and he was in the camps, and he made these really interesting observations about people who survived, and he
Yeah.
developed a whole type of psychological therapy around after his experiences. But one of his observations is that there's a gap between stimulus and response, and in that gap is where our freedom lives. And the more that you can think about what happens in that gap, that's where we have more control and freedom in life. And that's actually one of the great objectives or missions for leaders, is to actually find that gap and be in control of that gap.
Yeah. Yeah. No, true. There are so many mistakes I've made in life by just reacting to what first thing I felt,
Right.
and it's the only way to not do it is to create that gap between what you are feeling inside and how you react.
Now, do you find, you just talked about quarterly, so I'll betray my own bias on this in asking the question, but I'd always like to see whether people have the same experience. I find like a lot of the work I do is helping entrepreneurs have a very rigorous planning and execution framework. Um, and it's not so rigid that you can't adapt to changes, but the fact that there's a structure of planning in there with priorities almost forces that stimulus response gap to happen, because before you make a decision, you've got to think about how it integrates or changes the plan, which is like makes you have to take that momentary pause and not react, which is I actually think one of the like really important values of that process. Do you engage in that? Do you find that kind of thinking helpful?
Very helpful. Initially, we were not. Initially, when we started the business, it was like whatever comes, right? We'll just make it happen. The only goal was to grow. But last few years, we've definitely done that. Created like ghost plans or OKRs. So we do an annual planning and then three priorities from that, and then we do project plan on each of those priorities to make sure that we continue to see the growth through quarter, every quarter in whatever goals we created for
Right.
that. And it has been so helpful. And I like when you were talking about it, the idea that was coming, I think it's in personal life too. It's you are putting the brackets around, this is my space and this is how I move in this space. Without that space is when reaction, that you don't have that, right? Like here you this is what has happened. How do I feel within the boundaries that I am, that gives you the time to make the right decisions, to know this is my space and this is how I react in this space.
Right. And so with that planning, what's next for you? What's next for the business?
This year, our goal is to really, actually this year for the next few years, it's to become sustainable. So last few years, we were just focusing on grow, grow, grow. The market was such, you grow distribution, and we've realized a lot of business that we have is not sustainable. It's not making profit. So we have to figure out a way on how do we right size the business so the business stays sustainable for long run. And I think that's the whole industry is right now working on those priorities. I think the last 7-8 years, most new businesses that were launched, the idea was you scale it and you sell it and you're out of it. So it doesn't matter whether the business is sustainable or not. So everybody was just trying to, like, I know companies that are public that lose almost the same amount of money they make in a year, in a quarter. I don't know how that business is. How can that be a sustainable way of growing? I don't understand that part. I understand, for some time you need cash, and then at some point it should become sustainable. It should pay for itself, right?
It's funny.
And,
every few years, I've been in business a long time, and it's every few years, maybe more than few. You have these people come in and think that's what the game is all about. I remember in the web business in the late 90s, people were pitching in my business about things that, it'll be a stock play that will. And I just said, no, I'm not investing in a business that's just a stock play. I want a business that has a business model that's sustainable. If you look at like Warren Buffett and those guys, like they invest in businesses that have a business model.
Solid businesses, exactly. And I like General Mills. I was in an industry. I was like all those older companies. They're very sustainable businesses.
Yeah,
it's the new age food CPG world where the whole model is so messed up, and then you get carried away, right? Like you do what everybody is doing, and then when you realize that, I don't play with the same rules. One, being a BIPOC founder, again, just like all BIPOC founders, raising money for us is way more difficult than raising money for other people in the same category, probably. Two, my products are in a slower moving category. They're not a fast moving. They're not, chips that people consume the minute they buy. It's over before you reach home.
Right.
Right. It's something that stays in the fridge, or it's not drinks. So,
have you followed me while I'm shopping?
Have I what? Sorry.
Have you followed me while I'm shopping?
I am talking about my own behavior. Right. So you need to understand what the category is, where you're playing, and how that turns out, and not another lesson learned is not try and be how someone else is, because that might not apply to where you are.
Right.
And work based on your boxes.
Now, one last question before I do just the rapid fire conclusion is you do a meal for a meal. So I guess there's two parts to this question. One is, how do you do that? Like, is that a financial contribution, or is it a donation of your product? Like, how do you quantify a meal that's been delivered?
It's a financial contribution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And is that through another charitable organization? It's a donation to a particular group?
Yeah, to three different groups. So we donate to Food Banks Canada. We donate to Food Bank in US. So Food Bank LA was our very first beneficiary, and then we have partnered in different cities because LA I felt needed the most. And then a food bank in India called Akshay Patra Foundation.
And how does that? So the second part of that question is you your product line and the way you developed your products. I'm guessing because you're pure for what you want to put into it and not using preservatives and things like that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I would think you probably have a slightly higher cost structure in your product relative to like Heinz's ketchup or something. And then you're also doing a donation on top of that. So you've got a margin shrinkage in there. How do you balance that out from the business objectives? Like some entrepreneurs who do good, they're just content. I have friends who say this. They say, I have a good lifestyle. I'm content to take a lower margin than somebody else. Whereas others, they found efficiencies or processes or alternative ways of maintaining that margin. Like, so how have you managed that tension?
So for us, starting out, because it was just part of the mission, like our company, we started with this motto that we want to fight hunger with food, right? Like hunger is a very solvable world issue that challenges more distribution of wealth than anything else. And if by giving money, if me cutting down, or if me considering that donation as an expense, like we spend on marketing, like we spend on sales, if that allows someone to eat, why wouldn't I? Right. And that's how I see that expense. A lot of MBA students ask me that question, but what's the ROI on that? And I was like, return on impact. I don't know if there is a measure yet of return on impact. It's a problem that when I started the company, I chose that I want to make a difference in solving it. And if the donations to me is making that impact, then I've gotten the return. Whether my financer, who I have none right now, believes in it or not, is not something that I need to convince. If we have partners who don't think fighting hunger is important, then I don't think we should partner with those people, right? So if you don't think donating to people in need is an impact or does have an ROI, then maybe you don't need to be part of this. Again, you can't be for everyone's plate, right? So.
Right. Although when people ask that question, I always sort of push back on that a little bit too. Like I think the asking what's the ROI on that betrays a certain value set as well. And you've asked those same people, like, what's the ROI on your golf clubs? What's the ROI on painting in your living room or in your office?
I like that.
Right?
I like that.
There are certain things that you invest in knowing that it doesn't have an ROI, but it has some material benefit in your life. You get the golf clubs, you could buy the $1,000 golf clubs or the $500 golf clubs. Why? You enjoy the game a little bit more. Does it produce any more income for you? No. Does it produce any more time for you? No. But there's some just inherent value that you see in it. And I think sometimes that constant question about what's the ROI on this kind of do good investment kind of betrays a lack of commitment to try to make the world a better place. It's almost a justification for not having to take that extra effort.
Exactly. I agree totally. Yeah, so that's I don't think you should do it if ROI is what you're looking for.
Yeah. It's or if it does have an ROI, great, but it doesn't have to. And this notion that our margins always have to be as high as the next person's is, not necessarily.
Exactly. And I mean, we have had I have not spent a lot of money in marketing because I don't have the margins, and that's okay. Like I'm okay with that right now. But I wouldn't say that I'll take this money that I'm donating and put it towards marketing.
Right.
Like that is not a decision that I'm going to make.
Well, this is one of the things why I love entrepreneurs. Like entrepreneurs are not beholden to a shareholder class that requires only return on their investment. An entrepreneur
Mm.
can decide for themselves whatever the return is. And there's long-term benefits. I've had clients who, like during COVID, the economic pressure was to let people go. And they
Yeah.
said, no, we've done work together where they actually preserved their cash flow. And so they said, I've got cash flow. I'm not going to fire people at this horrible time in life.
Yeah.
Long-term benefit, they didn't do it for this reason. The long-term benefit was they came up with all kinds of new solutions because people wanted to use their time effectively. They wound up having their most profitable years. But that wasn't the motivation. The
Yeah.
motivation was they want to be a good person.
Yeah. Totally.
So
Totally.
sometimes the ROI is less direct. And I'm hoping that'll be the case for you. Like I say, just people having those conversations about what does doing good actually mean. Those are great.
Yeah. No, exactly. I'm going to take that idea and see how I can start those conversations. I think everybody should have those conversations under the table.
Totally. Okay, so
Yeah.
I always just finish off with some rapid fires. I've used a lot of your time. But it's been really fun.
No, it's been fun.
What's one decision or action that most helped you get where you are?
Um, just taking the first step.
And if you had to do it over again, would you have done anything differently?
I would have learned a lot more about the industry before jumping in with both feet.
Good advice. What's one aspect of running a business you've yet to master?
Um, I guess financing, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah,
Raising money, managing money.
that's very common for entrepreneurs, actually. Richard Branson actually says that it was only in the last number of years that he actually learned what margins were. He didn't understand the financial stuff at all in his business. He just had people to look after.
Yeah.
What's one personal quality that you most had to improve or overcome to succeed?
I would say selling skills, just being okay with selling. I was a shy person. This doesn't come naturally to me. I think I'm still working on it. I would one day want to be like a connector, the person, everybody knows this person. And selling, I don't say selling means like old car salesman selling, but just selling, building relationship kind of stuff. I don't think I'm inherently very good at that. So that's a stretch. I'm there in one-on-one conversation, like this is fine, but I am not the person who would, reach out very often because I personally feel I'm taking space that I shouldn't be taking when I do that. So I just stay in my zone, and I'm trying to get better at that.
So I'm going to pause here, and I'm going to puff you up a little bit, maybe in a way that isn't comfortable, but just on that point, I just think there's some things you and I talked about this a little bit before, but most people have to sell to get into a grocery chain, and you had a buyer trying to get you in, right? You're out there mentoring through three other areas or through three different channels, and you're connected to charities and things like that. So I sometimes wonder if there's that perception that, oh, I'm not a good salesperson or I'm not out there doing this stuff when you are, in fact, already out there doing it. You do that, and like you said, I don't want to take up space, but it feels to me like you're someone who actually achieves that by giving space. And I just think that might be an interesting thing for people to reflect on. There's taking space, but you offer space. It feels to me, which is a different way of achieving that kind of success. And, that might just be worth something valuing or for you to value about yourself even. I don't know. What do you think of that?
No, thank you. It's very kind of you. And I've tried to think about it, why I feel uncomfortable. And because I actually enjoy when somebody reaches out to me. Like it's, I would love to help more. And I'm sure people think the same way. There's some hesitance that holds me back. To be honest, it's not just with work relationship. It's also with personal relationships. I find it challenging to reach out.
Right.
Um, just, hey, I would love to chat, kind of chat, or
Yes.
So it's something that I need to work on. I need to work on developing those relationships the other way too, right? Like I don't know, maybe I feel I'm not giving back anything in that relationship, so I feel uncomfortable. I don't know. I'm just still working through my challenges.
Good humility. What's one personal quality that most contributed to your success?
Personal quality. That's a toughie. I would say the idea of learning. Like, I am a lifelong learner. I never thought as a kid I would say these words, lifelong learner. But I have learned to love learning.
Mm,
And I think that has really helped. Like, in starting a business makes you learn so many things that you never thought you would ever have to. Um, it just and I find it exciting. I find researching and learning about new things just exciting.
awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. I love the conversation. I applaud you for all the success you've had, and I hope you continue to realize more. And where can people find you? Find your products?
Yeah, so goodfoodforgood.ca, that's our online platform. In Canada, you can find us in Loblaws, in Metro, Sobeys, Whole Foods, many independent retailers. In US, you can find us in Whole Foods all across US, Save Mart, Hannaford. Again, all the retailers are on our website. But our products are available across Canada and US. So, go find it and try it.
Thank you very much for your time. And everybody go out there and get some good food for good.
Yay! Thank you. Thank you so much, Warren. It was incredible.